Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us, particularly in like
Absolutely.
mile 24 when you could just be like, you know what, we're done. So.
No, it's very nice of you. You know.
You've been on Rogan a bunch. You know the drill, right?
Yeah, you're like Joe Rogan's favorite politician.
Yeah,
by far.
Which
is like, that's high praise in today's day and age, you know?
Absolutely.
I've listened to you like, what? You've been on like 4 or 5 times?
I've been on a few times, yeah.
It's, because Rogan is like Carson and Cronkite rolled into one person, you know? Plus Howard Cosell because he's a sports commentator. So it's like all 3 guys.
His just, last time I saw him, I was in Austin. I didn't go on his podcast, but went to the comedy club. We're having a conversation after.
That's cool.
And he's like, remember back in, I don't know, 2000 whatever, when you told me XYZ about this person? Like, yeah, I remember that. He's like, well, he literally verbatim said what I told him like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, man, how do you, he's like, I remember everything.
You know what's funny about Rogan is...
But the cool thing with that was the thing I pointed out to him at the time, he disagreed with it. Mm-hmm. And then
he changed
what
his mind.
I told him, once he saw the truth, it was revealed like, oh yeah, the thing you said about this person manipulating elections, like, yeah, it was actually true.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what all I was going to say is, what's interesting about him is it's just have a conversation where you're actually listening to people and you're attempting to understand and you're actually interested in who they are and what they have to say. And miraculously, in the vacuum that he emerged in, like whatever it was, 15 years ago or something. Because I remember when he was doing like the live streamer things with the weird lights in the background. The Fleshlight was the sponsor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. That was when it was fun.
Right,
it was really
but you do those things, and people are receptive to it. People, want it because there's such a lack of that. In the sound bites of the mainstream media and he's an awesome person. And he's honest and he's forthright.
And then they want to shut him down because of that, right? So it's like, You
remember when he was, doing his own protocol he got COVID, and on CNN they put like a filter over his face to make him look more gray and sickly.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing with the gray sky for like the Bitcoin mining destruction stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's so ridiculously petty.
Well, this is what I want to ask
a few years ago, didn't they cut you off the end of the... Like, weren't you on the end of this, or was it Andrew Yang? I'm thinking of, but somebody was at the end of the stage during the primary, and they just totally blanked them out. It was very obvious.
There was a Vogue shoot of all of the female candidates running, and there was one version of it where I was erased, literally erased from the photo.
They're like, oh yeah, that was like a mistake. Yeah, it's like a Photoshop error. Like, sorry.
No, that's like some Stalinist
and I wasn't
kind of
on the
stuff.
end.
Yeah,
like, it wasn't like, oops,
right.
crap. Like,
You're in
I'm
the
like
middle.
right in the middle.
Yeah, it literally reminds me of that photo of Stalin with the guys that all like vanish over time.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. I mean, like the other thing that I find fascinating though is like, Joe's such a great example of somebody that like you approach him with this logical approach, and he's like, "Oh wow, you're right." But I feel like we live in crazy land now, and I feel like I point that stuff out to people that I love and care about, and they double down in the narrative they've been told. And the thing that really scared me was after COVID, we got to a place where I was like, I don't know if we can actually have sincere dialogue anymore.
Yeah, I mean that is the difference, right? Is in order to have a dialogue or a debate about something, usually we have to agree like on the basic foundational facts, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, like the sky is blue. We can agree on that and start there to talk about weather patterns or whatever. We can't do that now.
Right.
You talk to people and there's like this, I don't know, it's like an alternate Twitter files. I use that as an example. When all the Twitter file stuff came out, I was really curious because this is documented text that has been released. How do you dispute what has been revealed? And so I started looking online. What are the different talking heads saying about this? And, the major networks, MSNBC. And I watched this one clip where I think it was an MSNBC clip or I don't know, somebody from there who had a pod, something like that.
Yeah.
But they outright dismissed what was being said in the Twitter files. And then they said, well, even if it is true, all it's revealing is that something like a bunch of stupid racist Americans were being censored on Twitter, and good for America. And that was and then it was like, okay, on to the next. So it's it makes it hard to have real dialogue and substantive conversation, even about like, okay, we can agree to disagree. Well, how do we get to that point if we can't even stand on the same ground.
I asked you this a little bit last night, but when that's the case, and we can get into like the incentives behind that behavior from their side maybe a little bit later, but when that's the case, and when you're running for president or when you're in Congress and doing all the things you're doing to, at least as far as you're concerned, really have a positive impact. Now, maybe you're wrong on some things, and that's the process of, re-articulating your perspective as you go on. But like, how do you continue to kind of press into that when you know, like, every step of the way, you're not just going to confront challenging ideas, because we're all down for that. Like, let's put our ideas together and challenge them. You're going to confront almost seemingly an animus that doesn't want solutions to problems, and you might construe that as evil. Maybe we don't get that dramatic, but how do you tolerate that? Because we would all probably be exhausted by that. Like, you go on a debate stage, you go to a mainstream media hit, whatever it is, and you just continue confronting this like nonsensical resistance to solutions or goodness or truth or whatever, however we want to characterize it. I mean, I know you've had a long week, so
no, I mean the hope and the inspiration in those kinds of situations that you're talking about comes from remembering that, even as flawed as our election system is and can be, ultimately, like if I'm on a debate stage and we're dealing with the kinds of things that we're talking about here, the points that I'm making aren't really to Kamala Harris or to Joe Biden or Cory Booker. I'm speaking to people at home, and the people at home are the ones who have the power to say, yeah, okay, you make sense. This other person is crazy, or they're speaking about nonsensical things, and therefore being able to make informed choices. And so really it's about focusing on, who am I actually trying to reach and communicate to? Who do I actually care about? It's not these other politicians on the stage.
Right.
It's not whoever the CNN moderator might be. It's actually really like on that debate stage, looking into the camera.
Speaking to the people.
And exactly.
What do you think when you encounter those people, the talking heads, the Kamala Harrises of the world, what do you think animates their behavior? Like, why is it like that?
I mean, it's so
why
much
is
of
it so
this
uncanny and inhuman? Have you heard her laugh? Like, it's
Has anyone not at this point? I think there's. You could probably point to a lot of different things, but I think one of the core issues there is, as I'm talking about, okay, well, even now we're having a conversation with each other, but we're also having a conversation with people at home. Mm-hmm. In Washington, the bubble is so isolated that the echo chamber that they create around themselves and like patting each other on the back and complimenting each other and making sure that, okay, we're all on the same page, we're all parroting the same talking points. I sound smart and you're saying the same thing, so that means you're smart and you're smart. But if you stand up and say something that's different, or you say, hey guys, you might not be right about that, then like, screw you. There's the exit sign. And so as far as what animates them, it's not, it's mostly not about solving problems. It's not about saying, hey, well, here's this real challenge that we need to work together to address. It's like, okay, well, as long as you're telling me I'm doing a good job and you're inviting me to the right parties and you're on TV and you're telling me, oh, you're so great and yada, 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 that's all I need. And that's what motivates, that is so much of what motivates the bubble that is Washington, D.C., out of touch with reality, out of touch with the American people.
Do you think that's just ego, broadly construed? Like, so some people like yourself, maybe you subordinate your behavior to higher values and principles. You say, okay, I have my needs and preferences and imperfections, but also I believe in truth and freedom and beauty and love and these things. And so you try to use them as guides for your behavior. So they are more elevated than your own sense of self, let's say, as you construe your behavior. But in those people, I feel like it's the reverse. They subordinate the world to themselves in a sense. And do you think that's why they're so easily perhaps led astray, unconsciously in these sorts of things?
That is exactly what's at the heart of it, is just put very simply, are you putting service above self or self above service? Yeah. And to be in a position where people are literally voting for you and hiring you to serve in jobs that once were, you enter public service. That's literally what it is. And yet they are driven by their own selfish desires, ambitions, whether it's greed or power or attention or fame or whatever that selfish motivator is. That is exactly what is at the heart of it.
Right.
I'm so curious about this. Like, do you actually think at any point in time most of these politicians ever like contemplate the ethical position that they're in? Because like I think to us it seems so obvious the endemic corruption, how much they're deeply involved with it. And I honestly wonder if we just said like, hey, do you think it's wrong that you're making what's technically insider trading based off of this information, but because it's legal, it's okay? Because like it's clearly an ethical issue, and I'm just wondering if you think they actually ever consider it in a meaningful way.
You know, I'd be making some. My assumption would be, my assumption is that there are those who know it's wrong and do it anyway. There are those who think, well, everybody does it, so it's okay. And there are those who, again, this is just the way things are in Washington, and it's the way they always have been and the way they always will be. And so, you know, they are not without, again, this kind of goes back to that bubble. If the only people you hang out with are people, hey man, I just got this tip, make a few bucks, and that's the norm. And if you allow yourself to be disconnected from reality, where a clear-minded person be like, wow, that's like some really shady stuff going on. If you're not putting yourself in that position to be exposed to truth and common sense and you know, making ethical decisions, then I've seen how quickly one can live in a place where the norm is one standard that is very different than the standard that most people would hold themselves or others to.
You want to go ahead?
Well, I just want to say it's really interesting because like we have this same almost ethical problem inside of Bitcoin with like the crypto people. And like almost the exact same thing. There are people that know it wrong, do it anyways. People that aren't thinking about it, do it anyways. And people that like it never comes in. And so it's really interesting that like we have this same problem almost going on inside.
You know, for me, it's like, okay, so corruption is such an old song. It goes back to, you know, like the very beginning of, you know, all of our human systems and governments, right? And so it's like we're always going to have corruption. And like, yeah, maybe it's at like a crazy level now. But, you know, it used to feel like in America, if you stood up and told the truth and, you know, you withstood a lot of social pressure for doing so, and you were later vindicated, that we rightfully looked up to you as a hero. We lionized you. And now it feels like culturally we've just totally lost that. And it doesn't even matter if you were right? Like, you know, there were a lot of people that spoke up about a lot of stuff that happened during COVID, you know, the Wuhan lab, like we don't know, you know, many things. And they lost their jobs. They were socially ostracized. They got their lives destroyed. You know, where's their apology? Where's their sorry? Where's your cultural like respect for your fellow Americans who like told the truth at great personal sacrifice? So like, is it deeper than just, I don't know, the censorship industrial complex? Like, is it a cultural thing? You know?
Well, it's deeper in the sense that we are now, you know, I mean, I agree with what you're saying is that, you know, there's no accountability for those who are claiming to speak the truth and they're not,
right? And
those who speak the truth and are ostracized. But the deeper thing there is we live in a time now where the existence of objective truth is being erased, and so what is true then becomes very subjective and dictated by whoever happens to be in power.
Do you remember the blue dress from like 2014? It was an internet meme. And basically like people were trying to figure out, was the dress blue and black or was it white and gold, right? Yes. This was a famous meme. And, you know, it's everybody who looked at it saw something different. Half the people. And so I think like almost all pieces of online information are like that. They're like a Rorschach test. But the truth is that dress has a real color in the real world. And you could Google it to figure out, and it was actually blue and black. So the real color of the dress, even if there was an optical illusion that was making it look white and gold, right? And so I feel like there are so few people willing to go source that truth, but it's still, objective truth is always going to be out there. It's never going to go away, right?
Well, I think this is part of the reason, actually, why you're here at this conference and why we're all so enamored with this thing that is Bitcoin, because we grew up in the world and we started educating ourselves and looking out and wondering why that was lacking. Like, why do you see so much dishonesty and lack of integrity and corruption and greed? and a just lack of ethics everywhere. And if you don't have a solution to that, you become despondent and you despair and depressed. And look at, diseases of despair are rampant today. And there's reasons for that, substance like drugs and social media and all that. But I think underwriting it is like that. There is no objective truth. There's nothing that you can use as a totem to say, this is what I'm strapping myself to orient a perspective that's actually going to allow me to lead towards the things that are meaningful in life. And I think Bitcoin, as silly as it sounds or strange as it sounds to people outside, many of us see it as a kind of objective truth, as in it can't lie to itself. It's kind of inviolable in reference to itself. And on the surface, it's like, yeah, so what? But in the context of what we're talking about, it's like, well,
in a world of uncertainty.
Right. And especially when we kind of consider that money is basically an extension of yourself. It's like an emblem of your sacrificed time. And it's your expression of what's valuable to you. And it, circulates to everyone. And that's how we trade up and we kind of go beyond our limitations through trade and surplus and that kind of stuff. But it very much is that thing. So how consequential is it that we found something, or something was developed rather, that seems to be a profound form of truth? And it's not just anything, it's the thing that we use to express ourselves intersubjectively in the world. And far more so than our speech, because, as the saying goes, talk is cheap. But when you spend money, you're making a sacrifice. And so it's a far more real expression of what you really feel, or what you're really oriented by, or your values and principles. And so for that reason, you combine truth with that mechanism. And I think that's why it's becoming so meaningful to people, and why it's helping them to resolve the discomfort and frustration and angst of interfacing with a world that's seemingly bereft of those things now. And I don't know if you noticed.
Increasingly exploitative.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And so I don't know if you noticed in your interactions here, but do you not sense that there is that kind of exuberance when you have found something that emboldens you to pursue the path of righteousness? Again, a bit dramatic, but that's what we're talking about, right? The values and principles that are rightly most elevated. And throughout history, they've been pretty well identified. And we find ourselves in a period where they're, increasingly hard to find. And we found this thing that's allowing people to express them more in their life. And it's emboldening them. And it just so happens that the more people that do the same, the more those people are capable of doing that, because it's a money. So the purchasing power increases, and we kind of know the story there. But have you picked up on that? I know you're fairly perceptive
I've
person.
picked up on that here at the conference, but also just I picked up on that over the years from just people who I know, close personal friends, family members of mine who have become educated and gotten and honestly shared that kind of exuberance. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that on its face, the immediate reaction might be like, what's going on here? Yeah. I don't get what you're so freaking excited about. Mm-hmm. But when you look at it within the broader context of what's happening in the country, what's happening in the world, and you connect this with freedom, and you connect it with opportunity, and you connect it with transparency, mm-hmm. and certainty, and individual empowerment, mm-hmm. then I think it starts to kind of oh, okay, so this is obviously something bigger than just a fad or something that's passing through. It really opens the door to all of those things that I think whether people realize it or not. I mean, those are things that we want to be hopeful. Right. We want to be empowered.
Right. What's the aspirational point we were talking about last night? I mean, people are fearful now, and rightly so, because everything is so hairy. Yeah. But just telling people how fucked up everything is not a very, it doesn't inspire people.
Exactly.
But if you can get something to, give people a vision for themselves to aspire to. And I think, I know this sounds somewhat odd to a non-Bitcoin audience, but as all of us are example of, and a ton of people we know and meet, that process of having that kind of element of truth and emboldening you and allowing you to courageously embody these values and principles, that is incredibly invigorating. And that's a vision to aspire to. And then all the other important things in life that come after that can be pursued with more vigor and more hope and more energy and all that kind of stuff. But I do think we need, I mean, maybe this is a lead into this question, but a lot of people in this space also are kind of done with the political process. Not everyone, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's kind of like, look where we're at. You know, and the American experiment is probably the best one ever. It was founded on the best principles, Enlightenment thinking, all that kind of stuff. But look where we are. And so should we be looking to the political apparatus for solutions, or should we say, look, man, I don't know why, I'm sure there's many reasons, but it's kind of done. No one's coming to save you. You got to save yourself. Now, I happen to think the best approach is to fight on all fronts, you know, but what do you kind of say to that way of looking at the circumstance?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Things are bad. Things are very broken. Things are very corrupt. But you may disagree, and maybe it's I think it's kind of selfish just to say, you know what, it's broken, I'm going to take my goodies and walk away, because there is something much bigger that we are striving for in this country. When we look back at those founding documents, we look at the vision that was laid out for the potential of what was possible in this country, that was founded on this foundation of freedom. And that very foundation is being threatened and eroded right now. And so, you know, we can both have clear eyes and have a very realistic view of the great challenges that we face, and also take that all fronts approach to being able to strive towards providing that peace and freedom and opportunity and prosperity for us as a country now, and, you know, literally for generations to come.
Mm-hmm. Eric, I see you wiggling over there.
So with all due respect, like I'm an anarchist. I'm completely anti-status through and through. And again, it's not because I absolutely share those values in the deepest ways, but I fundamentally believe like we exist inside of legalized lawlessness at this point in time. The state of emergency that began with 9/11 has been continued through today. And like if you push the wrong buttons, you can be labeled an enemy combatant and you can vanish. Like this is something that can actually happen, and it's truly terrifying. And again, I absolutely don't want to give up. Totally should fight on all fronts, but I don't think this is giving up. Like this.
What this are you referring to?
The election game and trying to play politics as we've seen it. Because like to me, this isn't about trying to get the right people elected. Like this is a fixed game, you know. And I think. I honestly think if we had 90% of people in the United States who wanted to vote for you, there would be a methodology to make sure that that didn't happen. And I have to tell you, because of the amount of endemic corruption, when people say, we just got to vote, we got to change, I say, look, I'm sorry. I've seen so much more political development with not taking my cookies away, but saying, there's this thing, Bitcoin, that it's a fundamental, like this is a form of law that's truly law, because nobody gets to make unilateral decisions about if I don't get my money, you know? And it's like incredible that people like Edward Snowden used that to be able to get himself out of country into safety. And if he didn't have Bitcoin, he would have the same thing happen to him that happened to Riley Winter, to Julian Assange, to all these people that are hugely heroic that I think are being locked up under false pretenses. And to me, like, this is just straight up treason. So as much as I absolutely have such respect for what you're doing, I just think it's a fool's errand at this point in time because the game's fixed. And so I'm really curious about how do you go into that with feeling like it's stacked against you?
Why are you wasting your life, Tulsi?
No, and again, absolute respect, because I think it's a great struggle, but at the end of the day, it just looks like a fixed game to me.
There's much of it that is, but when we look at some of the great challenges and the great struggles that our country has gone through and the great changes that have been made in the past, those changes have been made because we, the people, have taken a stand to bring about that change. It's never everything we want. It's never as fast as we want. But when we look at the emphasis that our founders placed on us as a self-governed people, that's where we find the answer. And as a vote, you look at on average, there's like 40 to 50% of people actually even turn out to vote or registered and then actually turn out to vote. So there are so few people who are actually involved in this process, and it is largely what has led to what we're dealing with today, where we have a lot of people in positions of power who are abusing their power. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about individual civil liberties or rights, and it's becoming more and more blatant. They used to actually try to hide the corruption a little bit at least, or pretend like they weren't trying to tilt the scales in elections or whatever the case may be. It has become more and more blatant, and the positive side of that is I think more and more people are waking up to that fact and becoming more and more distrustful of the process and these institutions. And that's where I believe as more people are recognizing the truth and reality, it creates that opportunity for more people to be driven. We talked about this last night. When you're seeing how this is affecting you and your family and your bank account and your safety and your livelihood, it is motivating more people to say, well, what do I need to do to be a part of the solution?
Yeah, I think one thing I would like to talk about is like the tools that individuals can use to empower themselves.
Yeah.
And so basically like
that's something, I'm just
Right.
going to interject here because I hope you're going to talk about the question that I was going to ask as a follow-up to yours is, as people understand kind of these broader principles and themes that are surrounding Bitcoin, and there's examples of it, and there's some great testimonials I've seen just through this conference of how people have used Bitcoin to be able to get out of oppressive societies and just all of these things. I think for people at home who aren't exposed to this, how do you turn those aspirations into like, okay, at a practical level, I know I go to work, I get paid every 2 weeks, I get a W-2 at the end of the year, and I pay my taxes and I try to support my family.
Right. Yeah, I think just in general, we tell people to, dollar cost average into Bitcoin, like, take a small position,
Right.
like don't go all in. I mean, Bitcoin is volatile, it's still in its adoption curve, et cetera. And so, you should walk, crawl, run, basically, or crawl, walk, run. Yeah. And
You're one of those kids.
I
That
am,
was just awesome.
The thing that to me is like when you said Snowden, it brought up a quote for me, which is Snowden has this quote that like, in today's society, we are forced to stand naked before power in a very real way, right? Because of the surveillance state. And, I know that sitting here with you, you have a device in your pocket and I have a device in my pocket and my little GPS pings. And, somebody at some agency looks at it and says, oh, this guy was with Tulsi. I wonder who this guy is. And then somebody pulls my file and looks through it. And same with you and same with you.
Are you regretting inviting me here today?
No, I mean, it's just like, that's that is the world that we live in today. And it's like, if you rewind the clock 100 years ago, the state didn't always win, like against its people.
Yeah.
Right? The people could win a lot of the time. And now we have these Orwellian style technologies where like you're looking at like 100% win rate from the state, right? So if the state is as corrupt and evil and, dysfunctional as we've like alluded to during this podcast, and it has a near 100% win rate, it does start to get pretty nihilistic. And I think for me, it's like, it's about encryption and, enabling encryption powered individuals. So all encryption technologies, Bitcoin being one of them, communications apps, uncensorable communications, free speech first platforms. These are the things I'm most interested in because I think it's kind of terrifying that there's like every text I ever sent is it a, exactly, in an essay database. And like,
I think part of the answer to your question, and this is why actually the work you do is really important, because you need to have an understanding of the principles, the why on all this. And it's not just like, here's the tool, because the tool requires the motivation. And I think like a lot of people, you say, how would you frame it? And you say dollar cost average and stuff. And of course I agree with that, but it's also changing the thinking. Tyranny feeds off the responsibilities that you relinquish or that you don't take for yourself. And so we can sit around here and be like, oh my God, everything's so fucked. But the truth is how much of that is because we've all delegated or relegated responsibilities outside of ourselves when perhaps we shouldn't have.
Right.
Now, in some cases, the technologies weren't there to do anything about it. And I think that's my broader, pragmatic sort of approach to this is if you don't take responsibility for yourself, somebody else will.
Yes.
And at a certain point, they're going to do something that's counter to your best interest.
Yes.
So if you have the capacity to take responsibility, do it. And so a simple one is like health. Don't show up when you're 65 and 300 pounds at the hospital and be like, fix me, what's wrong? That's your fault. You should have done something before that. But now we're in a case where things like Bitcoin have come up, and Nostr more recently, and we can touch into that if you'd like, where protocols for allowing an individual to take responsibility over the most important elements of their life, i.e. their purchasing power, their money, their savings, and how they communicate and express themselves, so communicate with one another and how they express themselves to the world in a free speech protocol like Nostr. That's the invitation. You say, it's not about Lambos, it's not about retiring in the south of France, it's not about any of that. It's about, if you don't take responsibility, you will be tyrannized. These are the tools that allow you to take greater responsibility, and that is the only real way you will ever fight back against tyranny, because that's how you keep it at bay. And you have to continuously do it. You have to remain vigilant in that process and not become apathetic or overconfident over the course of time because things seem good. That's why we get these cycles of time where things seem good and then things seem bad. And notwithstanding, there'll always be an element of that. But if the tools exist for you to take more responsibility for your own everything, they should be taken. And in my opinion, that's the strongest thing anyone can do to reject tyranny and invite more freedom and sovereignty into their lives.
Well said.
I mean, don't you think though that unfortunately,
there's so many things that come into play there with this increasing sense of victimhood or victimization in our society. Like you gave the example of somebody who's obese and has had a heart attack and goes and says, "Fix me." It's like, well, okay, here's the nutritional makeup of what you should be eating. Here's how many minutes you need to go out and exercise every day. And a lot of people are just like, yeah, no, I don't want to do it. Give me the pill.
Right.
Give me the pill.
And then you decry the big pharmaceutical companies that run rampant everywhere. It's like, well, it's because of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, like on that same note, like just give me the pill. I feel like so much of what we're doing in the financial world is the same thing, and it terrifies me because, I go to people and I go, hey, like we just made $6 trillion that we just flooded into that system. And that's your money that like you will have to repay. No democratic process about it at all, unilaterally done. And then they gaslight us about it. It's transitory. Don't worry, like eggs stay affordable. Yeah. Flash forward, like we see the highest levels of debt that Americans ever had. We see the lowest levels of savings, and we're seeing this tidal wave that the federal government, that the Fed has created specifically by jacking rates faster than they've ever done in modern history. And it's terrifying because I tell everybody that I know and see, like, there's a tidal wave coming. It is going to destroy all of your savings. It's going to wreak havoc on the American economy. And vote harder. Oh, there's no accountability. So I'm at the place that my outrage is so deep when I say bail from the system, use Bitcoin, because this is the only lifeboat that's here to save us. Because this doesn't work and you're alone. And when you say this is painful and help me, they're going to tell you it's your fault. And I'm just really fascinated to hear about what's your opinion about how do we get the Federal Reserve specifically and the financial system at large under control? Because there's not even moral hazard anymore. It's do whatever you want. You will get bailed out.
Yeah. So I introduced the Ron Paul legislation when I was in Congress to audit the Fed. And as you can imagine, not a whole lot of co-sponsors. But this does come full circle back to the more people are educated with how corrupt the system is and how there is no accountability, the more they need to, because whether we like it or not, this is the system that we live in this country. You choose to live in this country, this is the system of governance that we have. And so the more educated you become, everybody should be calling their member of Congress. I'm sure Tom Massey's got the legislation to introduce this go around. Everyone should be calling their member of Congress and saying, why have you not co-sponsored this legislation? Why are you not adding your name to what do they call it? They have like a discharge petition where you can bring a bill directly to the floor and bypass all the committees. Right. There should be bipartisan support for this because we're seeing these systems crumble around us and there is no accountability and no control over this guy who's making these decisions. This is how we work within the system that we have, as frustrating as it is, to try to start to bring about to pull the curtain back and to start to bring about some of the change and some of the accountability.
I think that's actually, to your point earlier, like you asked Eric, like withdraw or escape from what? Like kind of the cliche, I'm going to opt out, I'm just going to go do my thing, my money's fine, and that kind of thing. To be kind of unbecoming a civic, relinquishing your civic
I
duty
don't
or
think.
something.
I mean, if somebody chooses to withdraw from the financial system, I mean, I'm all about individual
sure.
choice and like, hey, make the best decision for yourself. And I think everyone should be supportive of that.
Oh, absolutely. What I was going to say is I think there's a harmony here where it's not that I don't see it as opting out and finding, the beach in Thailand and living in a hut and that kind of thing. I think, and this is where I think your role as a communicator broadly in meeting all these people is very valuable and could be even more so, where you're talking about all these principles which we've covered already. And I see using these, broadly speaking, freedom protocols that I just referred to as a means of scaling back your life to have it more in your control so that you can go back out and engage the world more effectively, more confidently, with less on the line in everything you do. So if it's all dependent on that bill getting co-sponsored, if you have all your eggs in that basket, you're going to hate it. You're going to feel failure and failure and failure again. And it's just, I don't think it's the proper way to maintain the motivation required to be vigilant and ultimately succeed, let's say. But if you've done what you can do in the areas that you can do it,
Sure.
And then I feel like you might be reinvigorated to say, okay, I've done what I can do. I've taken my responsibility, but now it's time to go back out and say, I fixed
How do you
me.
help?
Let's get together and fix this thing. And I think people that were doing it, that would do it on that basis, it would just be way more effective because you wouldn't be as precarious, your own situation. You wouldn't be so concerned about the backlash of doing it. You'd have more confidence, more courage, all that kind of stuff. So I don't see it as an opt-out as much as a opt-in to taking responsibility where you can, where you can get your own freedom. And then in the areas where it's a collective freedom, let's say, that's just, politics broadly speaking, engage based on principles and find the others and do that kind of stuff and aspire to the highest thing you can aspire to in that realm.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll find some good outcomes if we do it that way.
Sure. And that's where I think some of the in the military, talk about, okay, you've got your 50-meter target and then your 7,500, 300-meter target. Like the 50-meter target to achieve what you're talking
Right.
about is to recognize how in some states like mine in Hawaii, there are obstacles to even allowing people to be able to make that choice
Right.
where, well, no, you're not allowed to trade or you're not allowed to purchase, you're not allowed to hold any of whether it's Bitcoin or, you don't even have access to the platforms that would allow you to be able to do that. And so, it's all of these things are done in the name of, well, we're going to protect you from being harmed by
Right.
these platforms or this unprotected or unregulated space. There's just so many parallels with that excuse being used for that. And obviously we've heard that over and over with the COVID related stuff. And we hear it over and over with the misinformation, disinformation stuff, the censorship stuff, like all of these things. Well, yeah, we are going to protect you from making bad decisions that could potentially harm yourself. And it's not coincidence that those actions and those decisions are further empowering, whether it's big pharma or big government or whatever. And so that's where, changes at the immediate level. And there are people in Hawaii who are working, okay, we're going to go to the state legislature. We're going to try to help educate people. We're going to try to build the support to be able to make those changes so people can be empowered and have the freedom to ensure their own freedom.
I mean,
So you even have the option, basically.
Yeah.
Nostr coming up earlier is really interesting because
What is that?
So there's a decentralized protocol that is.
What is it called?
That's called Nostr.
Okay.
And so essentially, it's a decentralized protocol.
Nostr. Nostr. It's called Nostr. It's okay. It's hard to pronounce.
That's me. I
Nostr.
mispronounce everything. So, anyways, essentially, it's a decentralized protocol using similar cryptographic protocols similar to Bitcoin. And so, essentially, the node mechanism means that you literally can't shut this thing down, even if the State Department was like, terrorism, we got to shut it down. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that Bitcoin, Nostr, and other protocols like this is about us seeing that The government is tyrannical at this point in time. I'm not going to debate it. It clearly is tyrannical. They clearly will silence us. They clearly will shut down our bank accounts, and they clearly will eventually, as we're seeing it go, I think put us into gulags or something like that. And it is terrifying, and that's why I choose to do all of these things together. And I'm just really curious, like, you're based and you're saying awesome stuff that I love. And I just have to be curious at, like, what point do you worry for yourself about they go like, all right, time to, like, turn off the switch and shut down all of her social media and make sure she can't get her message out. And I'm just really curious do you think about this, about essentially the state turning on you because your message is maybe getting too loud or too outside of the Overton window for them?
Of course.
I mean,
it's reality.
Yeah, and we want to give you Bitcoin and get you on Nostr so that when that happens, you go, oh, hey, I still got my Bitcoin. I can still, hey, they're trying to shut down Twitter, but no big deal. I got Nostr.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, this, I don't wear rose-colored glasses about what we're facing. And I whether or not there's proof, like, I have experienced some of these things already. Mm-hmm. And for the things that I haven't experienced, I just assume. I just make the assumption that this is the world that we're living in.
Right.
And so from what I'm dedicating my life and my time and energy toward, looking for those alternatives. Like, okay, if you're going to switch, like using YouTube as an example. Okay, if you're going to switch off YouTube, I'm simultaneously building up on Rumble, and I'm looking for other platforms and other technologies that other people are coming up with, so that that I'm not dependent solely on one specific thing to be able to get this message about freedom out to people, so that we can create this critical mass that has the power and the energy to be able to bring about change.
To me personally, it's a big tell when a politician is not pro-Bitcoin, because in the same way that the internet is a tool to spread American values, Bitcoin is a tool to spread American values. And I mean, what is more American than property rights and speech? There's nothing more American than that. And if you're in a dystopian government in the third world, or the ascending world as we call it now, I mean, you're not going to be able to store your property because somebody's going to come along and steal it from you. Mm-hmm. But with encryption, you can. Exactly. And that's what Bitcoin enables. And we have these little devices. They're called hardware wallets. Anybody, here, I'll show you one. This is a little device called a tap signer. This is $20 to produce. It's a little cryptographic key in here. And unless you have this, you cannot access the Bitcoin on my phone. So you have to have those.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, although he could put as much money as he wants on there, literally billions of dollars.
Right.
I think an important distinction to make, because of course everyone's like, yes, censorship on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and everything, so people go to Rumble or Parler or True Social, all this kind of stuff. I think the way we think about it and people in the space think about it, it's not don't be evil, it's can't be evil.
Yeah.
Because whoever is propagating don't be evil, no offense to Rumble, they seem great right now, but they can be corrupted.
Totally got you.
Whereas a protocol.
Well, you look at what happened with Project Veritas.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And so
one little flip of a switch, and
and for the
whole
things
thing
that
is
are
gone.
as important as money and speech, I don't think we can take that chance anymore. So I think a lot of people who are communicating these ideals we've been discussing ought to familiarize themselves with these freedom protocols, let's say. Because Nostr stands for notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. And it's a way of basically cryptographically signing.
Yeah. Hang with us. It's
But
very
it makes
nerdy,
sense.
but
Okay. Say that one more time.
notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. Everyone likes
I love it.
weird sort of names.
I'll show it to you. It looks just like Twitter. It sounds weird and nerdy,
I won't
but
get
it's normal.
bogged down. But
It's
the
normal.
punchline is the way this works, it can't be corrupted. So you sign your note, you sign your tweet with something that only you have access to.
Right.
And it's not like it's going through a central server, so they can be like, oh, no, that was risky. That was risque. She can't say that. It just goes. There's all these different relays. Well, someone will transmit it, and even if they don't, at some point you can pay them to transmit it and all this kind of stuff. And now Bitcoin has been built into this new protocol. So you have a financial incentive that's built right into speech, basically. And so everyone's very excited about that, and it really only came on the scene in December. That's when it kind of became more popular. And we don't have enough time to dig into all the potential, but I think your mind would probably appreciate what happens when, one, people can say whatever they want and they can't be silenced, and two, their identity on a particular platform is portable without any loss of anything. So let's say, you're on Twitter and you have a better experience on whatever the competitor is. then you just go there. It's not like you lose the network effect or the followers you built up on Twitter. Your identity is portable without loss. And so what does that mean for the types of solutions and the competition dynamics that will happen? And I tend to think it means we're going to get a lot of really good pro-freedom technological solutions really fast.
By the way,
so
also,
it's super exciting.
This is going to be a necessity because of AI. So like normal people are going to have to get comfortable with cryptographic key pairs because it'll be the only way we tell who's human and who's not, essentially, right? Yeah.
I have a question, we're coming up on time, but what do you think, talking about kind of your own considerations of the dangers you're taking on doing what you do? RFK Jr. was at this conference. He spoke. He was at the thing last night. He's saying a lot of things that make sense, kind of very much in line with a lot of things that you've said over the years. He seems to be polling fairly well. His family history of contravening the status quo or the state powers, or however you want to characterize it, not super encouraging, to say the least. And I know he's aware of that, obviously.
Yeah.
But what do you make of his candidacy, whether the party will permit him to progress at all? Like, just give me love to hear your thoughts.
I think it's great that he's running, and I appreciate, the things that he's choosing to focus on and talk about, and the voice that he's bringing to a lot of people who have felt voiceless and unrepresented for a long time, regardless of party. I have, and I talked to them a little bit about this yesterday. Like, I in 2020, I went through the DNC working with the media and working with big tech to try to shut me down and silence me and go to like a total blackout, where literally like the people that I was able to reach as a candidate running for president and a sitting member of Congress were the people physically in the same room as me. And so we were trying to live stream these things, and there was a media blackout for a period of time. Where they went through a phase of like, well, we'll just try to smear her and call her all these names and discredit her. And more people were like, hey, why are you picking on her? Let me pay more attention to what she's saying, because you obviously don't want her to have a voice. People, Joe Rogan brought a lot of folks, informed a lot of people about my candidacy. And so the media decided, well, shit, this isn't working. So we'll just, like, there were articles written in the Washington Post, articles done on cable TV where they were talking about the candidates that were in the race, people who showed up at specific events. I went to this event in Houston that was called She the People, about women running for president. And I wasn't mentioned as being present and speaking in the article. This is a Washington Post article. And so my press person called me and were like, hey, you're not even saying that she was there. Like, at least say she was there.
Right. And
he said, I have no obligation to do that at all.
Except for like being a journalist.
Right.
Yeah, it's your whole job, bro.
But I know I kind of got off track there. But I am cognizant, as is Bobby Kennedy, about the realities. He's very cognizant of the realities of the powers that he is choosing to go up against.
Yeah. And
I hope, for any of you either heard him or had a chance to talk to him, I hope you got the sense of sincerity and peace in his own presence and heart, and his resolve to take this on, knowing full well what we're talking about, knowing full well history, and yet choosing to do so anyway.
Which is amazing.
It
when
is.
you see those displays of combination of principles, virtue, and courage, like, people respond to it. And I think that's why people responded to you and him and anyone else who's doing that in the culture today. And that's kind of what's great about this Streisand effect. Like, now it's almost a heuristic. Oh, if the mainstream media is like canceling someone,
you're like,
into them.
What's
you
up
gotta
with
check
that?
them out. They're probably
cool.
pretty sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so that's wonderful, because hopefully that means things are changing.
Yeah.
I know this might be a difficult one for you to answer, but do you think, based on what we've been saying about the apparatus and all these different ways it works, could he actually get through, or would that just be something that they just won't allow?
He can get through, and the reason I can say that quickly is you look at what happened in 2016. Donald Trump ran for president, and he ran against all of the machines. The Republican National Party was anti-Trump. Fox News, mainstream media were anti-Trump.
Right.
Everybody was he was a joke. He was a punchline. People were trying to destroy him and shut him up. The Durham report is exposing how the national security state was weaponized by Hillary Clinton to go after him and try to undermine his candidacy and spread this lie. All of this stuff was what he was running against. He won.
Yeah.
Not only the nomination, but he won the presidency. There's a lot to talk about what happened next.
Right.
I think some decisions and personnel selections that should have been done differently. But the point is, it can be done.
They didn't want it, and he
It
got
can
through
be
it.
I honestly think 2016 was our most democratically held election. And
do you-
that's an
That's
unpopular
where-
opinion, but
What do
it's
you
true.
mean? What do you mean?
What I mean is the will of the people, was made whole in Donald Trump. Like, people wanted Trump. Like Tulsi said, none of the establishment wanted Trump, and yet
Yeah.
he got in there
And
anyway.
the more opposition they threw his way,
Right.
I mean, and this is why there's a lot of Democrats who have never taken the time, even objectively, to try to figure out, like, why does this guy still have such a huge following?
Yeah.
Why is it that when these things happen that would tank anybody else,
Right.
his support grows? And really, when you look at it, what does he say? He's like, they're not. What does he say? They're not coming after. They're coming after you. I'm just in the way.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and the people, like the limousine liberals, like they basically, they just think, oh, those people are all terrible, racist, white supremacists. And it's
Exactly.
like, oh, I think those are actually people that work for a living.
Well,
and I
oh,
don't
yeah,
think they're all terrible,
And how would you
evil white
Is that
supremacists.
going to endear me to support you when you call me
No,
a white
yeah.
supremacist, which I've been called, and a racist
Right.
and a sexist
You're a-
and all
yeah,
of the
you're a
things?
Hindu
I've
white
heard you're
supremacist.
All of
horrible.
them.
Yeah, you are
Exactly.
horrible.
All of them. The fact that you guys
believe
even
we
invite
invited
me
you here
here
today.
is like pretty cool. But that, and this is a great note to close on.
Totally.
Because we should not be those who live in a fantasy world. Bad things come from those who live in a fantasy world and make decisions based on things that are not real. Yeah. We should be clear-eyed. We should be honest. We must speak the truth and recognize and harness that power that we have in our hands that has been shown to be possible. Not easy, not quick, but in the system that we have in this country, this is the only way that we can make change. And it can happen at every level. And it needs to happen at every level and in just about every sector of our country.
Amen.
And our society.
Can I ask one final question? You are without party right now,
Yes.
politically. Can I get you to join the Orange Party? That's the Bitcoin party. We just basically buy a lot of Bitcoin. There's not a lot of tenants really at the moment.
We're working on the details.
Yeah,
but,
it
it's
is.
like we said, it's the kind
Sometimes
of step
we
one,
eat steaks,
and then the platform
yeah, we buy
comes
Bitcoin.
later.
Yeah, that's basically the whole thing.
Is this like a political party?
We could start it right now.
You seem
Right,
like
right now it
started
starts.
with- No, but in all seriousness, before we let you go, I mean, is politics something that's completely off your horizon because
of
you've
course
been there,
not.
done
I wouldn't
that?
be here. I wouldn't be here. If
You're
it
still
was.
interested
No,
in
she's gonna be the president, bro.
right.
You're sitting with the future
No,
president.
That's true. I bet.
To me, it has never ever been about chasing a specific title or a job or a quote unquote political career. I come from Hawaii. It'd be really cool to just go surfing every day and hang out in Hawaii.
Yeah.
My motivation and my what drives me is to do all that I can to best be of service to the American people in this country. And the best way to do that is to help work towards ensuring that we, the people, can live free, that we can live in a peaceful society, that we, therefore, living in a peaceful, free society, have the opportunity to be prosperous as a people. And so that's what I'm dedicating my energy and my focus and my time on. And, wherever and whatever position or place or whatever puts me in the best position to be able to do that. That's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna keep trying to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, look, I wanted to speak to you last night just for the same reason I wanted to speak to you today, because we've all been fans for a while, and maybe we wouldn't choose the same path because it's so difficult, but one thing that's been evident from watching you for many years is like your heart, basically, and that comes through in what you just said, and that for some reason we don't have time to dig into it today, but you care deeply about these people that you're trying to help, and that's obvious and it seems sincere. And so I just want to thank you for coming to the conference, learning a bit about this whole world, coming to do this today with some random guys that you just met last night, and wish you all the best in future endeavors.
I appreciate that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.